Right now you are wearing one of the strangest inventions in human history. Not your phone, not your shoes, your clothes. Because somewhere around 100,000 years ago, a nearly hairless ape looked at its own body and decided, this is not enough. And the strangest part? The first evidence for clothing doesn't come from clothes, it comes from a parasite. We'll get to that. You've put on clothes every single day of your life. So has every person you've ever met. As far as recorded human societies show, people almost everywhere have worn, carried, decorated, wrapped, or marked the body in some socially meaningful way. And if you don't wear them, you get arrested. Literally, the state will send armed officers to deal with you if you're too naked in public. We built entire legal systems around the idea that human bodies must be covered, which when you think about it is genuinely insane. No other animal does this. Not one. Dogs don't wear clothes. Elephants don't. Chimpanzees, our closest genetic relatives, sharing 98.7% of our DNA, have never once looked at another chimp and thought, cover yourself. So what happened to us? What made humans, out of every species on Earth, the one animal that decided its own body needed to be hidden? Here's something most people never stop to think about. Humans are essentially the only large mammals on Earth that are nearly hairless. Genuinely stop and consider that for a second. Gorillas are covered. Chimpanzees are covered. Bears, lions, wolves, horses, elephants, hippos. Across wildly different environments and climates, every large mammal is walking around in a full coat. And then there's us, standing in the middle of all this biodiversity, basically smooth, a bit patchy. An evolutionary look that says, I used to have fur, but something happened. Scientists believe we lost our fur because of thermoregulation. As our ancestors moved from forests to open grasslands and started running long distances to hunt, being covered in thick fur became a deadly problem. You'd overheat. Your core temperature would spike. You'd collapse before catching anything. So, over hundreds of thousands of years, we gradually shed our fur and developed something else instead. Sweat glands. Roughly 2 to 4 million of them. More than almost any other animal on the planet. This made us incredible endurance hunters. We could run for hours in the midday heat, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. No other predator could do this. Our hairlessness was our superpower. But it came with a cost. Without fur, we were exposed to sun, to cold, to insects, to every thorn and rock and sharp piece of grassland that wanted to cut us open. The standard answer for what happened next is simple. Humans got cold, wrapped themselves in animal skins. Problem solved. Except the timeline doesn't work. And once you notice that, the whole story falls apart. Genetic evidence now suggests that humans started wearing clothes somewhere between 100,000 and 170,000 years ago. The problem is that modern humans didn't leave Africa in significant numbers until around 70,000 years ago. Africa, where fur loss would have been an advantage, not a problem. So if clothes were a response to cold weather, why did they appear tens of thousands of years before humans went anywhere cold? Something else was going on. Something that had nothing to do with temperature. And the clue that cracked this open came from one of the most disgusting creatures on the planet. Lice. Researchers at the University of Florida made a discovery that sounds absurd but changed everything we know about clothing history. They mapped the evolutionary history of human lice and found something critical. Humans carry two types of lice. Head lice live in your hair. Body lice live in your clothes, specifically in the seams, folds, and fabric. Body lice cannot survive on bare human skin. They need clothing to exist. Without clothes, body lice die. Which means body lice could only have evolved after humans started wearing clothes consistently enough to create a new habitat for a parasite. When geneticists traced the moment body lice split from head lice, they found the divergence happened somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. In Africa, before the migration, before the cold. Let that sit for a second. A parasitic insect, one of the most universally despised creatures in human history. The thing that causes mass panic in elementary schools and ruins camping trips, accidentally preserved the earliest evidence of human clothing. We have no ancient garments from that era. The fabrics decomposed, the hides rotted, every physical trace of the earliest clothing is gone. But the lice survived, they adapted, they moved in, and their DNA carries the timestamp of the exact moment humans got dressed. The lice knew when we started wearing clothes before we did. A parasite accidentally became the world's oldest fashion historian, which is disgusting, but also somehow academically useful. That's either beautiful or deeply horrifying, probably both. Which brings us back to the real question. If warmth wasn't the original reason, what was? The first answer is boring but probably true. Basic physical protection. Not from cold but from sun, thorns, insects, sharp grass, rocky terrain, and the constant small injuries that come from walking through the African wilderness, with no barrier between your skin and everything that wants to scratch, bite, or burn it. A simple wrap of animal hide around the waist and legs would have reduced infections from small cuts, protected against parasites, and blocked UV exposure on the most vulnerable parts of the body. Not glamorous, but genuinely useful. But here's the thing about humans. We never stop at useful. We always make things mean something. And that's where the real story begins. Humans are, at their core, obsessively social animals. Every waking moment we are broadcasting signals about who we are. Our posture says something. Our facial expressions say something. Our tone of voice, our hairstyle, the way we walk, the space we take up, all of it communicates status, group membership, intentions, and identity. Clothing became part of that system almost immediately. The oldest known body decorations, beads made from marine shells, have been found in Africa and date to over 100,000 years ago. These weren't practical. They weren't keeping anyone warm. They were signaling something. I belong to this group. I hold this rank. I am different from you in a way that matters. Once humans started draping things over their bodies, the draping itself became a message. A hunter wearing the skin of a predator he killed wasn't just staying warm. He was telling every person who saw him what he was capable of. A leader wearing something no one else was allowed to wear was establishing dominance without saying a word. A person in mourning wearing specific materials was communicating grief to the community without needing to explain. This wasn't subtle. It was one of the loudest signals ancient humans had. Before language became complex enough to carry nuance, before writing existed to record status, before architecture could display wealth, clothing was the primary way humans broadcast identity to each other. Archaeologists have found evidence of this in some of the earliest human settlements. Burial sites from 30,000 to 40,000 years ago show that certain individuals were buried with elaborate clothing and ornaments, while others were buried with almost nothing. The difference wasn't random. It correlated with the individual's apparent social status. Even in death, what you wore defined who you were. Clothing became language. And it happened before writing, before agriculture, before cities, before any of the things we normally associate with complex human culture. This is genuinely one of the strangest things about our species. We took a practical tool and immediately made it symbolic. We couldn't help ourselves. The moment we covered our bodies, we started using that covering to tell stories about who we were. No other animal does this. Peacocks display feathers. Sure, cuttlefish change color. But they're not choosing what to communicate based on social context, cultural history, and personal narrative. That's entirely ours. But there's another layer to this story that the comfortable social signaling explanation doesn't fully cover, and it might be the most important one. Shame. At some point in human history, the uncovered body stopped being neutral and became something that needed to be hidden. Not just decorated, hidden. This shift is so ancient that nearly every culture on Earth has developed some version of it. Most societies have rules about which body parts must be covered and which can be shown. The specific rules vary wildly, but the underlying pattern is remarkably consistent. Certain parts of the human body carry a social charge that requires covering. Think about how strange that is. No other animal has this instinct. A wolf doesn't feel embarrassed about its body. A gorilla doesn't cover itself before entering a social group. But humans do. Across most known cultures, most continents, most eras of recorded history, something made the human body itself feel dangerous to display. Where did this come from? Evolutionary psychologists have a theory. As human social groups grew larger, the ability to control sexual signaling became increasingly important. In a small band of 20 people, everyone knew everyone's reproductive status, relationships, and intentions. Social dynamics were manageable. Conflicts were personal and resolvable. But as groups expanded to 50, 100, and 50 people, the social complexity exploded. Uncontrolled sexual display became a source of constant conflict. Jealousy, competition, violence, and social disruption increased dramatically. Groups that couldn't manage this tension fractured or collapsed. Covering the body, particularly the reproductive areas, may have served as a conflict reduction mechanism. It reduced involuntary sexual signaling in large groups. It gave individuals control over when and how they displayed their bodies. It lowered social tension in communities too large for everyone to know everyone else's business. This is a genuinely profound idea. It means modesty didn't come from religion. It didn't come from some abstract moral code. It came from practical group survival. Large groups of humans needed a way to manage sexual tension without constant violence. Clothing was part of that solution. Religion and morality came later and codified what was already happening. This may help explain why so many societies developed rules around public nudity. Not because the human body is inherently wrong, but because the social management system that clothing provides has been running for so long that removing it feels genuinely destabilizing. You feel uncomfortable when someone is unexpectedly naked in public. That discomfort isn't random. It's the echo of a 100,000-year-old social contract your brain is still enforcing. Now, none of this means warmth didn't matter. It absolutely did. It just wasn't first. Between roughly 120,000 and 70,000 years ago, Earth went through brutal glacial cycles. Global temperatures plunged. Ice sheets expanded. Large parts of Africa became hyper-arid. The human population may have crashed to as few as 10,000 to 30,000 individuals. We nearly went extinct. For the groups that survived, and especially for those who eventually pushed north into Europe and Central Asia, clothing stopped being a social tool and became the difference between life and death. A properly constructed garment traps warm air against the body. It protects the wrists and neck where blood runs close to the surface and heat escapes fastest. It allows a human body to survive temperatures that would kill an unclothed person in hours. The groups that had developed sophisticated clothing technology, fitted layers, stitched seams, sealed extremities, they survived, they had children. Those children learned the same skills. And those skills carried forward across generations as part of the reason modern humans reached every continent on Earth. We didn't just evolve bodies suited for the world. We built a second skin and carried it everywhere we went. And then something happened that changed clothing forever. Humans figured out how to make fabric. For most of clothing history, everything was animal hide. Kill something, strip its skin, scrape it clean, wear it. It worked. But hides are heavy, stiff, hard to clean, and you need to kill something every time you need new clothes. At some point, humans started working with plant fibers, spinning them into thread, twisting them into cord, eventually weaving them into fabric. The oldest known twisted plant fiber was found in a cave in the Republic of Georgia and dates to roughly 30,000 years ago. And here's the remarkable part. Those fibers were already dyed in multiple colors. Already decorative, already communicating something beyond simple function. Someone 30,000 years ago looked at a perfectly functional piece of woven material and thought, this needs to be a different color, not because it would keep them warmer, because it would mean something different. By the time of the Neolithic Revolution, around 10,000 BCE, textile production had become a core technology of human civilization. Flax for linen, wool from domesticated sheep, eventually cotton and silk. Entire trade routes were built on textiles. Empires were financed by them. Wars were fought over access to raw materials. The Silk Road reshaped the political geography of half the world. All of this from a cold, naked primate with clever hands and a piece of bone. There's one more piece of this story that most people never hear, and it might be the strangest part of all. Neanderthals wore clothes too. Recent archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthals in Ice Age Europe used animal hides for warmth and possibly for social purposes. They had stone tools capable of scraping and preparing hides. They lived in some of the coldest environments any human species ever inhabited. They survived Ice Age winters that would have killed an unclothed human in minutes. But here's the difference. Neanderthal clothing appears to have been simpler. Draped hides, not tailored garments. No evidence of stitching, no bone needles, no fitted layers. They essentially wrapped themselves in animal skins like blankets, held in place by tying or tucking. Modern humans, by contrast, developed eyed needles made from bone around 40,000 years ago. These needles allowed them to stitch fitted, layered clothing that sealed at the wrists, ankles, and neck. The difference between a draped hide and a stitched, fitted garment is enormous. It's the difference between a blanket and a survival suit. The fitted garment traps warm air more efficiently, allows greater mobility, and stays in place during movement and sleep. Neanderthals had bigger brains than us, stronger bodies, and had survived in Europe for over 200,000 years. But they may not have had the sewing kit. And in an ice age, that's not a small detail. Some researchers have argued that this clothing technology gap may have been one small advantage modern humans had in Ice Age Europe. Not the whole reason Neanderthals disappeared, but possibly one piece of the puzzle. better stitching, a better needle, a slightly warmer night. The idea that a species may have lost its survival edge partly because of a gap in sewing technology is one of the strangest sentences in all of human evolution. But the evidence is hard to ignore. So why did ancient humans wear clothes? Not for one reason, for all of them, in overlapping waves driven by biology and culture and climate and social complexity all at once. It probably started with protection, something between the skin and the thorns and the biting things. It evolved almost immediately into social signaling, a way of saying something about who you are in a world full of other people constantly judging you. It became a shame and modesty system as groups grew too large for uncontrolled sexual display. It became a survival technology when the glaciers came and the migrations began. And it became an art form, an industry, a language, and an identity, as human culture grew more complex. But underneath all of those reasons, there's one thing that connects them all. And it's the thing that makes clothing genuinely unique to humans. Every other animal on Earth lives in the body it was born with. It displays what evolution gave it. It signals with feathers or fur or color changes that are hardwired into its biology. It has no choice in how it presents itself to the world. Humans rejected that. We looked at the body evolution gave us and said, this isn't enough. I need to add something. I need to choose what the world sees when it looks at me. That impulse, the refusal to be only what biology made us, is one of the oldest and most defining features of our species. It predates language, it predates art, it predates agriculture and cities and writing. Before we could speak in complex sentences, we were already choosing what to drape over our bodies and what that draping would mean. Clothing wasn't just a tool. It was one of the first moments humans stopped being animals and started being people. You did it this morning. You stood in front of a closet and made choices about what the world would see when it looked at you today. You probably spent longer deciding what to wear than you spent deciding what to eat, which, if you think about it, means your ancient social signaling instinct is still beating your survival instinct every single morning. Those choices connect you, without interruption, to someone standing on an African savanna 150,000 years ago, wrapping themselves in ochre-stained animal hide and feeling something click into place about who they were. That thread has never broken. Not once, not in 150,000 years. You're wearing it right now. If you want stories that take something ordinary and reveal the ancient human need hiding underneath it, subscribe. Every week, we look at the things you do without thinking and find the real reason they exist.